Week 1.
The day that I found out I was pregnant, it was my 30th birthday.
Week 11.
I was traveling for work in Alabama. I checked myself into the hospital thinking they were just going to sort of laugh at me. And I also sort of thought maybe I would get to listen to the heartbeat and like see the baby on the ultrasound. All signs were pointing to losing the pregnancy, and so they gave me a bag filled with like hospital issued disposable underpants, and they put me on a plane back to Vermont where I could get an abortion if I needed to.
Week 13.
And I sat down, and next to me sat Bernie Sanders. And we spent the entire flight talking. We shared a bag of pretzels, and he took off his shoes and did calisthenics, and then encouraged me to do some calisthenics too. He had no idea I was having a miscarriage. I did not tell him that, but it went from being this like very, very like scary, solitary, sad experience to being like one of the most surreal and like kind of funny things that's ever happened to me. Like somehow my senator, Bernie Sanders, was my miscarriage doula.
Week 0.
I definitely was heartbroken in a way that I didn't totally expect. You know, I know that at that stage of pregnancy, you're somewhere in between bundle of cells and human child. But it felt much more like grief than I anticipated. I just wanted to be pregnant again instantly.
Week 4.
In my first pregnancy, there was just so much joy of like, this is sort of cool and different and weird. And then the next time it was just like, well, am I having a miscarriage today? Like, what about tomorrow?
Tell me about finding out you were pregnant.
My breasts start hurting so dramatically right away that I didn't even really need to take the test. I was like, ouch.
Week 11.
I made the doctor agree to like give me an early scan. And before I'd even gotten home, my doctor called me and she told me to pull over. And she said, we found a tumor on your ovary that's the size of a softball. And at that moment, everything sort of changed.
Week 12.
The decision we had to make was, do we operate on it while I'm pregnant? Or do we wait until immediately after I give birth? Then they had a meeting and they did special research. And then at the end of it, they took a vote. And the vote was 50-50. And there were real pros and cons to each. And it felt like the first big decision I was making as somebody's mother, and that it might very well be a decision that meant I would no longer be pregnant.
Week 15.
It was truly, 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 truly agonizing, and no part of it felt easy.
Week 16.
And then I got COVID, and it was the first time I'd ever had COVID, and I got very sick and like ended up in the hospital.
Week 17.
I remember going to the hospital and just being sort of a mess. Then the anesthesiologist who I'd never met came in, and he was kind of awful, and I said to him, like, are you good with babies? And like, I knew it's too early. You know, you can't deliver a 17-week-old fetus. You know, it's like I knew there was nothing he could do, but I thought maybe he'd say something reassuring. And he was like, not one's this small, haha. And then like walked out of the room, and I was like, shit, great. I was still in that sort of like post-surgery haze where you can't really see yet, and you're sort of in a weird room. But I remember, because I didn't have the anesthesia that sort of like wipes your brain, I like remember all of it. And I remember that the very first thing a nurse said to me, she like kneeled right down next to me, and she was like, the baby is fine. Do you want to listen to the heartbeat? And they put a heartbeat monitor on and put it in my ears. And before they told me anything else, literally before my vision had even really fully come back, I was listening to the heartbeat. Then when I woke up more, they told me that the surgery had actually gone pretty poorly. and that they'd removed the tumor, but I had started to bleed out on the table. In order to save the pregnancy, they just sort of clipped the ovary and took it and left. So I lost an organ. That was intense.
Week 24.
Here I was going to CVS to buy Advil, and I was growing a child, a human being inside me.
Week 25.
I remember like walking past a mirror and instead of thinking something mean, just not thinking anything. And then I was just like, holy shit. And then I remember I went to a different mirror. And I was like, wait, what? It's just a mirror. It's just my face.
Week 26.
I had a sharing size bag of M&Ms every single solitary day of my pregnancy.
Week 31.
I felt a deep need to have dumplings. And I said to my husband, I really, really want dumplings. And he was like, okay, but it's midnight and we live in Vermont. I was like, but I need dumplings.
Week 32.
I just benignly got this bikini wax, and I got these crazy bruises all over my crotch because I had double the blood volume in my body.
Week 33.
I was nauseous. I was uncomfortable. I couldn't sleep.
Week 34.
I was absolutely sick to my stomach.
Week 35.
My boobs hurt so much. They grew 8 sizes.
Week 36.
Every single time we got a package in the mail, he would be like, did you buy more bras? And I'd be like, yes.
Week 37.
My husband got COVID. I was like, all right, well, I guess I am trying not to go into labor.
Week 38.
You know, it was like a whole elbow would come out of your stomach. It was very strange.
Week 39.
I was so just desperate to be done with all of this, and I was so big and so uncomfortable.
Week 40.
He came in that morning and I was like excited to tell him about the fact that I was in labor, and he was crying and he was like, I just tested positive for COVID again. And we called the hospital and said, what do we do? And they were like, well, cross your legs.
Week 41.
I had done most of early labor like weeks before, and it just like nothing was happening. I wanted this to be as physiological a process as possible, and so I'd really wanted to go into spontaneous labor. I really didn't want to be induced, but at this point I was like, fucking induce me this instant.
Week 42. 6:31 a.m.
All of the cartilage between my pubic bone dissolved, and so like I couldn't really walk.
7:02 a.m.
They were like, go outside and go walk.
8:39 a.m.
I was just stomping around town, very mad.
9:10 a.m. 9:11
Very sad.
7 p.m.
The doctor said, it's impossible to flip somebody. And I said, I think I really want you to try.
10:10 p.m. 10:15 p.m.
I was sort of like upside down in these weird ways. They're like jiggling my butt and like doing all this other stuff. And it was the first time in the entire pregnancy that I had fun.
11:32
They put a
p.m.
knitting needle right into my vagina.
Midnight.
Somebody turned on Birdsong, which is like definitely not what I would have chosen, but it was so sweet that I just sort of loved it. And the mood really changed. It went from being like goofy and joking and high energy to like extremely focused.
1:26 a.m.
I can't rest anymore. This is too intense. I need help.
2:32 a.m.
The nurse was like, I see you've called the doula. Is it time to do? And I was like, yes, things have ramped up.
5:51 a.m.
I started throwing up, and I really hate throwing up.
6:23 a.m.
The like feeling of this sort of like loving focus that everyone had on me was like one of the most powerful feelings I've ever felt in my life.
6:39 a.m.
I was sweating my balls off.
6:42 a.m.
It felt like my body was ripping in half. But it, like kind of in a cool way. And I wasn't scared at all. I think because all of these like wonderful people were there. I'd never had the experience of pain before that didn't involve fear. The only thing you can do is like surrender.
6:46 a.m.
I, of courrise, immediately was like, oh my God, my uterus is the size of Canada.
She was like, I can see him. And I was like, push him back in. She was like, oh, no one's ever said that to me. Normally they're like, get him out. And I was like, no, because like I know it's okay when he's in. But like I was scared of what happened next.
6:53 a.m.
And then I was like, shit, this was a terrible idea.
6:56.
They would say, okay, take a break. And I'd breathe and I'd get some ice chips.
And then I felt this like feeling like my bones were breaking. And I said to the midwife, like, my back just broke. And she said, well, that's possible, but I didn't hear clunks, so it's probably not that bad.
6:57.
Okay, Kate, let's do it again. Let's give it another try.
And I was like, oh shit, this is labor? Like, I need an epidural. Like, I cannot do this.
They're almost here.
It has to be over now.
Oh,
7:30 a.m.
the baby's got a lot of hair.
I could do this for 5 minutes. I cannot do this for 10.
8:22 a.m.
I pushed again, and you came out. It was just the best feeling in the whole entire world, just that relief. And you were immediately placed on my chest, on my naked chest, and you were covered in meconium. And I just remember, is it a girl? Is it a boy? Because I wasn't looking down. And everyone said, she's a girl. It really was the happiest day of my life.
What did I look like specifically?
You looked just perfect. You had perfect hair, perfect round head, which you still have.
But then the baby was born.
8:38 a.m.
It was the greatest feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. Not even the baby. Like, the baby was amazing, but just the feeling of relief. Because there's so much inside of you. And, like, there's somebody whose, like, toes have been in your ribs for, like, months. And also just, like, so much fluid and pressure. And it's just gone.
8:50 a.m.
I felt literally like I could shoot bullets off my armpits. Like, I just felt so empowered and strong and wonderful.
Everyone was just sort of, like, washed in relief. And for me, it felt more like surprise. I couldn't believe he was alive. I just couldn't believe he was alive. But I was bleeding way too much. And I think this was the moment that the mood really shifted. And it became like, this is an emergency situation. And we need to manage this emergency. So they got me back into the bed and started doing what they call fundal massage. But massage is such a misleading word because it is unbelievably painful. They basically press on your uterus as hard as they possibly can. There was just blood gushing out of me. Just cups after cups after cups of blood would just sort of spill out. And it was such a weird feeling because all of your insides are, like, rearranged and it's all floppy in there. Like, your organs are all in weird places, and now there's someone pushing on you as hard as they possibly can. And there's just blood everywhere. But I had my baby and he was fine. And so I was, like, not worried. And every so often I would say to the midwife, like, can I just have 5 seconds to stare at him? And so she would stop and count out loud to everyone in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then they would go back to pounding on my stomach. But I would have those seconds to just sort of, like, refocus. There were, like, clots coming out of me like the size of apples. But I just didn't care because my part was over. And this was their part. And then this guy Tom showed up with custard French toast and maple syrup, and it was the best meal I'd ever had in my entire life. And he, like, took one look at the baby and gave my husband a huge hug and burst into tears.
Week 1254.
So, a little bit less than a year ago, I found out that I'm a carrier of the BRCA gene, which pretty much just means I'm more susceptible to some cancers like ovarian cancer. So a lot of doctors have sort of advised me that if I don't want to get pregnant, I should immediately sort of take out my ovaries. And so if I take out my ovaries, what that will mean is I'll go through menopause in my 20s and I'll no longer be able to get pregnant. And I'm wondering what you think I should do.
If you think it's worth it.
There's no way to know whether or not it's worth it, and what an impossible situation to be put in, especially at a young age.
I'm very curious what your assessment and reaction to all this has been.
There's part of me that really, really, really wants to be pregnant.
But also a huge part of me thinks that that's maybe selfish or something.
You are the master of your body. You get to decide what happens. And if you choose to have the surgery, there's the, you know, the grief of losing with it your reproductive life. And if you choose not to have the surgery, at least right now, then there's the grief with it of losing the sort of unencumbered feeling of health and longevity that most 20-somethings get to have. You just have to make sure that you let yourself actually grieve it in whatever direction you go in.
I think that being a parent and giving birth are two different things. And so I would be disappointed, and I think you would be disappointed if you chose not to have a child. But actually carrying the child, I think that's great, but I also think that parenting is such a wonderful, fulfilling life, and the least of which is having it inside your body.
Even though me being put on your chest was the greatest feeling in your entire life?
Yes. You don't know what you don't know, and you're going to have experiences that are going to be the greatest feelings of your whole life. I mean, I can remember the way you looked at me vividly as a baby, and that connection that we felt, and that had nothing to do with giving birth to you.
But I don't actually think there's a good answer.
I think that only you can answer that for yourself.
Thank you so much for listening. Thank you also to Gideon Parker, who composed the music for this piece. It was so much fun dreaming up what was possible. Thank you to Hannah Burgers for the one of one cover image. Sending so much editing love to Josie Fan, Sayre Quevedo, Axel Kacoutié, and Avery Trufelman. You all offered such needed perspectives. I want to give a special thanks to Isabela Ponce de Leon, Dillard, Quincie, Ndiaye, and the entire Carriage House Birth team. You all gave me a world of knowledge. Lastly, and with the utmost gratitude, thank you to the two protagonists in this piece. Both of your stories are magic, and you told them in your own special, vivid, real ways. I appreciate you both immensely. An extra thank you to my mom for helping me track down those archival birthing videos and ultrasound clips and putting up with my incessant interviews. And also, of course, thank you for birthing me. Okay, you've been listening to Creatures of the Wind. We'll be back.